This is the 2025 Email Design Trends webinar, what works, what doesn't, and why, presented by Really Good Emails, of course, and Beefree. We are deeply delighted to be able to kind of share these things with you all. So let's talk about what we're going to kind of jump into today. Probably a good thing to answer up front is like, why even talk about trends? Like, is it useful on its own? And the answer to that, I think, is really like trends on their own, not all that interesting or useful. Like, it's maybe good to know what people are doing out in the world. That's good to know. But it's what we can infer from it, what we can intuit, what we can learn from it when we start digging in deeper and not just look at like the surface trends. Now, why we're talking about it in terms of accessibility is for a few, I think, really solid reasons. Like, but the main being, and this is just sort of my take on it, which is that good design is accessible design. Email design is essentially like a subset of information design. And information design is successful and effective when people are able to comprehend that information easily. That's why like good, well-designed email is like air. You don't notice it, you're just taking it in because it's easy to navigate from one thing to the next to know where you're supposed to look. And if you have a whole section of your audience who's not able to comprehend your email easily, then I would say that the design probably needs to be improved, right? Do we have any strong feelings or reactions from the panel about any of that? Am I saying anything that's shocking or or that you disagree with highly?
Not shocking. I think it's just that good design is accessible, which means good email design that is accessible is going to be an email that performs well. And ultimately, that's what you need it to be. You need an email to be able to, someone to be able to read it easily, someone to be able to take action on it easily. So like accessibility is also a little bit about performance too. And I think we'll probably get into why that's important.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, I always think that design is about solving a problem. So in this case, the problem is we want to send a message to our recipients. If that recipient can't engage with it, then it's not about the brief, essentially.
Yeah.
And the problem hasn't been solved. We can use creativity, and that's all good, but you need to have a core and center of what you're doing. Is it actually achieving what it's set out to do?
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, for me, like from my background's all in code, and I was obsessed, well, still am obsessed with email rendering and making sure things work and gives a good performance on every email client. So if a trend doesn't work in Outlook or it breaks something in Outlook, if it falls back cleanly, that's fine. Or it doesn't work in Yahoo, then it's broken. And accessibility is the same thing. If it's not accessible, it's broken. And that's why it's so important. So if you've got this great trend and it looks great, and when you send it out, it doesn't work, then what's the point?
Yeah, it does sound like we're pretty much all on the same page there. That's good to know. So that's why we're talking about it in these terms. We are going to take a look at kind of the top 4 design trends of 2025 derived from that Really Good Emails data. And for each of those, we're going to discuss them, kind of what you think makes them effective, what is accessible or isn't accessible about them, as well as maybe like, if you want to be a little cheeky and stand out, what you might do there. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, although we might answer a few questions as we go along. We'll see how we're doing here. So let's jump straight in to the first trend, which is the sans sage. The sans sage strips away the unnecessary flourish and speaks in crisp, modern lines that readers can trust. Legible at every size and on every screen, this card tells you elegance is in restraint and accessibility starts with clarity. So sans-serif fonts, perhaps unsurprisingly, but was the top design trends in terms of commonality in all the examples that we took a look at. So we've got a few examples up here on the screen to take a look at, just emails I think that are doing well with showing how they like making use of that sans-serif font. So between Charity Water, Sundays, YNAB, Eden, we've got some very solid choices there. But let's talk a little bit about so on its face, how accessible do we think this trend is? Sans-serif fonts in general. We could talk a little bit about kind of what it makes it effective or not. But on a a 1 to 10 scale, where are we at with the sans-serif fonts?
I'm probably going to go for about 7 because it's kind of like it's the easy way to go and think, okay, sans serif equals accessibility, right? There are good reasons why the choice might be sans-serif, but it's not the only consideration. There are things to consider, like the actual characters themselves within typeface. So are they clear? Are they distinctive from one another? They're really important factors to consider when you're thinking about. So
that makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of less about like not necessarily like sans serif or not, but rather a lot more about kind of the individual character glyphs and like whether or not those are distinctive enough from one another in order to be able to easily distinguish them. Am I hearing you right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that definitely comes into it when you're thinking about things like dyslexia. But yeah, just readability generally, being able to distinguish one character from another is really important, and especially if you think about how email is read. We glance at emails often. We don't, read them like a book. So that instant recognition is important.
That's an excellent point. So instant recognition and sans-serif probably holds up pretty well, in order to do that, depending on the sans-serif font we choose.
Yeah.
As with so many questions in email, it can be answered at least in short by saying it depends, but with a little bit more length, it just means like looking for sans-serif fonts that have distinctive differences between the fonts. Mark or Jaina, any other thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think like as Paul said, like serif fonts, sans serif fonts, it's about the font, and also it's about the individual. Different people have different preferences and find different things easier to read. Both sans serif and serif fonts can be good. Both sans serif and serif fonts can be bad. There's a bit of a compromise. Often one font will be very readable for one person, but a bit harder for someone else. So there's no such thing as 100% accessible. That's not a possible thing. There's always some sort of compromise going on. But yeah, both sans serif and serif are good. Cursive is generally quite bad. I avoid that. It's okay every here and there for something maybe, but yeah, cursive is bad. And like something for me, I quite like monospace fonts. I find the uniformity. I'm dyslexic, and I find the uniformity of the letter spacing makes it sort of easier to read because it's less likely to skip characters as I'm reading. But also, monospace is not that common, so if you're not used to it, it can be quite jarring to read monospace fonts. So maybe that's not the best option. But I spend my days looking at code, which is mostly in monospace, so it's quite normal for me. So it really is sort of different for different people, and there are tools that you can use to change the fonts. So yeah, doing a little testing around that is always worth looking at as well, just to making sure that you're not completely blocking that.
Yeah, and excellent. I mean, I would also agree that cursive is bad. My cursive is very bad. Like I think my mother put me through penmanship lessons when I was younger, and it's all gone now. So I think probably good for me to realize that I shouldn't ever be using cursive in email for many reasons, but one of them is that. But that's a good note about monospace fonts in particular, being helpful for folks with dyslexia, which is a big very common disability. Yeah, some fonts, as always. Jaina, do you have anything to weigh in here around?
Yeah, just weighing in on the whole idea of commonality of fonts. I guess in today's kind of more digital age, a lot more platforms and apps are using sans serif fonts and websites. So maybe the younger generations are more used to reading sans serif fonts versus older generations. So maybe there's like a bit of a generational gap. We've got to think about it. Some people who are still used to reading newspapers, old media, so to speak, where serif fonts are a little bit more common. You might want to consider that as well, like considering the age group of your target audience. But in general, I think I don't want to pick you guys apart, but sans serif fonts, all caps, to me is harder to read and scan. So because you can't see the up and downs in the lettering. So that's one thing I would say when using it, whether it's sans serif or serif fonts, is like I think Paul, you were saying the kerning and the spacing between fonts and how it letters and how it's actually used. I think that can often be a little bit more important than the font itself.
Yeah, so critiquing the actual slide that's in front of you right now, Jaina, which is which is reasonable. That's a reasonable thing to say, and also why we have experts on here. Which you're here not only to kind of give us your expertise, but also to actively critique our presentation slides.
It
Which
was
I
right in
appreciate.
front of me.
It's right in front of you. Like I can hardly ask you to look away. That's good. Well, I think we've already kind of touched a little bit on like how this trend can be made more accessible, which is paying attention to like in particular the type of sans-serif fonts. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. Just using a sans-serif font. It's specifically looking for ones that are easy to take in at a glance, which is also like doing a quick kind of parse test on your email, like holding your email, pulling it up on your phone, holding it at arm's length, seeing how much you can like make out just at a glance is one quick way of doing it. Of course, that's playing to your own kind of perceptual bias, right? Like, so it's important to like engage with folks who have the disabilities that you're trying to reach in order to make sure that you are taking them into account as well. So that's why I send all of my emails to Mark to hold out at arm's length and read it and go out from there. Look, that's good. I think we've got some good points here. And then in terms of how to stand out, I think something that we can talk about. So here's an example from New York, not the city, but the publication, and they go entirely serif. Now, I'm not telling anyone that they should go entirely serif, right? Like that's not. But I think if you go full serif, that really has to work with your brand. But in terms of pairing, serif and sans serif fonts, that's something I've seen that has worked well. Do you all have any opinions about that? Kind of pairing those?
I really like it from a design perspective. I feel like using serif fonts for headlines and sans serif for your body text is a really you still have to artfully combine two fonts that they work together, because you can't just pair any old sans serif with a serif to make it work. I think there are some pairing websites out there too that can help you with that. But it can amplify what your headline should be and how it should be read. And it's just a nice visual change between seeing a headline and knowing, oh, okay, it's a headline because it's in a slightly different font, as well as being bigger. I think there are some little visual cues that it can offer as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's how you use spacing around those things as well. The example in front, you've got various ways of treating text within space. Arguably, the column width, in my opinion, is too wide to actually be readable. But it's things like that where you kind of like, okay, so let's consider space around both of your font choices, sans serif and serif, in your font pair, to ensure that you've got the right amount of saliency around a given heading, subheading, paragraph, so that you're not cramming all your text into one space and making it hard to. So it's not just a font, but it's the space that contains it that is important as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Paul. I think we need to kind of keep moving here. So briefly, like in terms of benefits of sans serif versus serif fonts, we've touched on some of these points already. But sans serifs have these like kind of cleaner, simpler letter forms, and that typically makes them a little bit easier to kind of parse quickly. And they typically scale well, again depending on the font. We've touched on that a good bit. So they can stay legible. Where we see like serif fonts having more advantages is like more like kind of long form print reading, and the serifs kind of help with some of that eye fatigue, going from letter to letter to letter to letter. We're good. All right, moving right along then. The next trend we have is the Vision Weaver, or photography-heavy visuals. Big, bold photography that sets the tone and tells the story before a headline even whispers. Authenticity is its magic trick, turning stock cliches into immersive visual spells that captivate and convert. Lots of photography. We're seeing people making heavy use of photography in their emails this year. We've got some excellent examples here. I think from Sundays and Road to Gosney, who is welcoming me to the family, and that feels very lovely to be welcomed. And then a lycopene dream. Lysopene? Jaina, I feel like you're the vegetable expert, but I guess it's
Ooh.
technically a fruit.
It is a fruit, and I know nothing about fruits.
Oh, they're right. I'm asking the wrong person. I'm so sorry. I forgot I had the vegetable expert on here. But yeah, so in terms of, photography, heavy visuals, things like this, I think the question is like, where does using photography make sense? As well as like, how could this trend be more accessible? Let's dig into some of these things. So what do you all see as like being kind of the best use of photography?
Coming back to what we were saying before about how email is read really quickly, then you can say a lot in an image very quickly. You can communicate a lot about what your what the subject matter is, and so yeah, setting the scene and what it's about is I think a really good use of imagery. And I think you could argue that with accessibility, there's a bit of myth that photography equals bad. Absolutely, that's not the case. It's using it well. That's the way to go.
Yeah. So yes. Yeah. And so it's not about again. It's not a kind of a black and white issue where it's like all photography is bad or makes it less accessible, or strong striking photography is bad, but it is kind of very much how it's being used. Yeah. Mark or Jaina, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think yeah, there is that, like as Paul said, there's this sort of this myth that imagery is bad, photography is bad in emails, and it's coming from the idea of people, visually impaired people, looking at your email or reading your emails, and if they can't see the image properly, then that's not great for them. But also there are people who communicate better with images, people who struggle with reading, and the text is a problem for them. So the visuals there really help those users. So it's again, it's this thing of this balance. It's what helps one person can hinder another, but it's trying to find the balance. And I think when you're using photography or any images in your email, it's good alt text is really key. And if you making sure you've got appropriate, well-written alt text is really what you need. Like think about, why is this image here? Why have we added an image? Why this image and not another image? If this image wasn't in the email, what information is missing? And think about that and just ask yourself why we have this image, and then getting good alt text from that. But yeah, images aren't bad. They're great. I love imagery.
That's good.
Love imagery. I think the other thing I'd like to add is around accessibility isn't necessarily solely around people with permanent disabilities or something that that hinders them on a day-to-day basis, but it could be around the need for accessibility with something that is a temporary disability, or not necessarily even a disability, but just like making something accessible for people who are in areas of really bad internet, whether they're traveling, whether they're using really bad Wi-Fi, or they just do not have good internet. Having these big bold images are great, but then consider them as well in terms of your accessibility too. Like, how do you optimize that image? How do you make it load quicker? Is there a way you can embed it in the email that is gonna help you, whether that's slicing up like the old-fashioned way, or whether it is just purely optimizing the hell out of it, so it is not like a 10 megabyte one big image, but it's something that is under a meg, and it's actually going to load really quickly regardless of what internet access you have.
Yes, I think such good points to raise, like that it's there are a number of ways we want to make things more accessible to people, and some of that is in terms of like technologically accessible as well. That's a kind of a portion of it. And I would say, and I think I might touch on this in a slightly later slide, like you never want your content to be dependent on whether or not, like the comprehensibility of your content to be dependent on whether or not the like spotty Wi-Fi in a coffee shop is working, right? Like just recently I was in San Francisco preparing for an event with Naomi West, just to name drop a little bit. And we were trying to pull up examples on this spotty coffee shop Wi-Fi, and it was quite interesting to see kind of who had alt text, whose emails like were really dependent on images to make sense of it all. So knowing like you want your email to make sense whether or not the images load, that's a really big kind of portion of it. And alt text can help a lot with that. Well-written alt text, as you kind of mentioned. Lovely. Well, and then in terms of kind of how to stand out, if you want to be a little cheeky, you want to maybe buck against the photography trends a bit, you can always go with some lovely illustrations like this. Now, of course, that's super brand dependent, but whether it's illustrations or iconography, the underlying kind of principle here, like, is to quickly convey like a set of like a feeling. Like, I think probably one of the things that imagery does well is that it can spark emotion more quickly than text can. And so you like, for instance, with these, like, there's a lovely playfulness to these like little animal illustrations. But whether you're using illustration photography, you're wanting to make sure that it's prompting people to feel something, because that's also part of what makes content memorable. If we don't have any kind of emotional experience of content, we're unlikely to remember it unless we're just playing the memorization game. So yeah, we touched on these points a bit, but in terms of the use case photography, it's like probably most effective when it helps subscribers see themselves in the story, showing products and context, sparking emotion, like we were talking about, creating desire. It can also kind of break up text nicely, which can make it engaging, and you could take in something at a glance. But yeah, you never want the comprehensibility of your content to be reliant on an image loading. So you want to use photos to kind of enhance your content, but not contain your content, if that seems reasonable to everybody. Moving on, right along, we're trucking along here. The signal flare, which is bright, saturated CTAs. When the signal flare bursts in your inbox, subtlety steps aside. This card champions vivid, high-energy CTAs that glow like beacons against any background. Pull this card and prepare for clicks to rise like a full moon tide. So we have some lovely examples here of some kind of bright, saturated CTAs that tend to kind of stand out like little neon beacons against these backgrounds here from section and stuff, fitness. Yeah, some like good options here. Let's dig into this a little bit. Like, for these bright, saturated CTAs, do you all see kind of any downsides, to these? Are there ways that we can make this kind of more accessible? Does it all depend? Like, we almost inevitably answer about any question here.
I think Emma Lemon in the chat put it pretty succinctly. She said it immediately looks trash in dark mode, though, which it could well do if you don't have the right code in there to make sure that your emails look good in dark mode. But also, if someone, again, I'm kind of banging the same drum, I think, in this whole session, but if someone is looking at their email at night or in a very dark room and they're scrolling through and scanning through those emails, those really bright, saturated CTAs can almost be too bright. Even if you've got your brightness, if you actually don't have your brightness turned down, it can be a little bit jarring, and it might be a little bit too bright in some instances. So I think some of those might be where those bright CTAs, while you think they're like a beacon in your email, it can be too much of a beacon, and it's like a blinding Cyclops flashlight in your eyes.
Like the sort of the LED headlights of the email CTAs. Yeah, if anybody's had to drive in front of anybody with LED headlights. Where's all my astigmatism folks in the chat? Speak up, call out. Yeah.
For me, going back to what I kind of said at the beginning about problem solving, so CTAs have a purpose to be used, to be selected, pressed, clicked, touched, whatever. If you can't see the color behind it, it's just going to look like a bit of text. Your visual language, which is your lozenge or the box it's contained, is immediately, arguably, disappeared because of the low contrast you've got there. So you're actually removing one of the visual cues that communicates. Oh, this is a button. You need to press it, or invite you to press it. So that's a danger of this. That may come through in terms of performance. When you look at click-through rates, have people not clicked it because they can't see it, that kind of thing. So it's really important. And the other aspect of that is it's actually, I looked at some of these emails before, and there are some of those examples which don't conform to the content accessibility guidelines from a non-text contrast point of view. So you've got to kind of watch that as well. So there's a couple of things.
Yeah, the contrast is really important there, and making sure you've got good contrast. But there is also, you can have too much contrast, which again, it gives you that glare. So it's getting the right balance again. But yeah, so the glare, like can be quite painful. Like, yeah, if you have that such high contrast, being able to pick out text against a glaring background can be very, very hard to read. And you don't need, you can get a good contrast without it having to be fluorescent. Like, look, I mean, this slide we're looking at, it's black and white, a bit of grey on there, and we've got those little pops of red, and it's not a overly bright fluorescent, horrendous, offensive red. It's quite nice, and it still very much draws the eye and pulls out. But also, yeah, there is, not everybody sees color in the same way. Some people are colorblind, so if you're relying just on that, it's not gonna work. So yeah, as I think Paul mentioned, that you're having these other things to identify the key points is also important.
Yeah, very much so. Well, first, thank you for affirming our RGE red here as being pleasant and effective. Yeah, what we're talking about. So there's kind of bright and saturated is a way of providing enough contrast. Like it's an attempt to provide enough contrast for something and for it to visually stand out, right? But it's not the only way to provide contrast, and you don't have to go to an extreme in order to provide that contrast. One of the most kind of basic starting steps for, I think, anybody who wants to start making their emails more accessible, and you will touch on this in a little companion piece that we'll be releasing after the webinar as well, is like tools and first kind of steps towards making your emails more accessible. Like, what are some good starter places? And taking a look at your color contrast is one of those. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can do this. There are some lovely external tools, like contrast.tools is one that I like a lot, that not only shows the kind of whether or not your contrast is meeting those accessibility guidelines, but also takes examines it in context as well. Like what other colors is it being set against or around? It gives a lot of kind of deep detail. But also, we in Beefree, we've got a lovely feature in our editor called Smart Check that you can run kind of at the end of your email creation, and it will help point out those color contrasts and make sure that they are kind of distinct enough. And as we mentioned, dark mode, absolutely a factor, and you don't want it to be so proud of a nice bright CTA and then have it look like a kind of muddy, sort of a muddy, dark, dingy looking kind of CTA. So you absolutely want to kind of test on all of those fronts, I think. Yeah. Any parting thoughts on this one?
The extreme colors are the ones that really mess up in dark mode, with forced dark mode. So if you're really pushing your fluorescent colors, those are the ones that are going to look the worst. If you're keeping things a little bit more subtle, they tend to invert a little better. But we don't always have control over dark mode. So when we don't have control, just sort of using some subtler colors, it can help there a bit as well.
I was just going to mention, I understand the need to draw attention to your call to action, because that is what you want people to do. You want people to click on that button. But I feel like just doing that by making it really bright, super bright neon part of your email is a little bit of a lazy tactic. Like, you've got to be able to get people who want to click on that CT, not just because it is a bright neon button for them to click on. So I'm always a little bit cynical when I see those little neon buttons. And I'm not going to click you just because you're bright and pink. I'm going to read the whole email and make an informed decision instead.
Have a flashing GIF with point arrows.
Yeah. I mean, this does explain a lot about when I was first trying to befriend you, Jaina, and I was flashing a lot of bright signs and wearing a lot of bright clothing, and instead you kind of waited and did your research. Yeah. So I think it's also it's always tricky marketing to marketers too. Marketing to marketers is a tough gig. Well, marvelous. That's good. Well, in terms of how to stand out, of course, you don't have to go, like we were talking about, you don't have to go bright. This is a great example from Sundays, which also, fun fact, we ran this through our Beefree Smart Check, and it came out perfectly. They made no mistakes in this. Just a nice kind of, black and cream or black and white can really stand out, especially when you've got, kind of other brighter colors rounded in the background. And it also doesn't hurt anything to have a picture of a dog, I think. So if you can combine a reasonably, not extremely colored CTA with a picture of your dog. Again, that's going to be brand specific, so we don't have to get too far into that, but that could help with kind of the conversion rate, I think. So yeah, they can grab attention, they can help with hierarchy, but they can also feel, as I think Jada mentioned very clearly, it can feel a little pushy. They can pose color contrast, accessibility challenges, or lose impact, certainly, if overused. So it's, if you're going to use these bright CTAs, you want to use them very strategically. And you want to also think about, like, does it need to be that bright? I think as well, a reasonable thing to ask. Moving on to the rounded realm. The next trend, which is rounded modular layouts. The rounded realm lays out its magic in smooth, pillowed modules that feel friendly, modern, and human. Rigid rectangles are out, approachable curves are in. This card brings balance and flexibility, stacking and snapping like blocks in a no-code dreamscape. Yeah, let's take a look at some of our examples here for rounded modular layouts. Also, I think it is I see this a lot with SaaS companies. This is a particular trend that I see, sub-trends. I think I've noted perhaps in a different presentation, like Loom in particular. They've never met a corner they didn't want to round off. Like it's, they want everything child safe and approachable, and Miro and Zoom, kind of being up there as well. But let's think about this, like rounded modular layouts. Like, where do these elements, not work? Like, how, what do you think makes them effective? How can we make this more accessible? Thoughts, feelings, compunctions?
I think, again, we can think about sort of the visual language here. Rounded corners are nice, and it does soften things. It does feel like more gentle and welcoming. But if every corner is rounded, then we lose some contrast there. So if you have all your rounded corners on your CTA, so it's like, oh, rounded means clickable. But then if you have something else that's rounded and it's not clickable, that's slightly confusing. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm just saying that's sort of one element that can come into it. So having that clarity of the visual language of it.
Yes.
But sort of, I sometimes find as well with CTAs, if it's square corners and it's full width, it can sometimes look like it's a heading. It depends again on what's around it. If it's sort of a clear break after it, then it makes it more obvious that it's a link. But if it's not, it can sometimes look like a heading. And also with rounded corners, how are you coding them?
Yes.
What's going on there? Are you using VML? In which case, that is horrendous for accessibility. So just scrap it. Get rid of all your VML.
And what would be the way then that you would recommend for folks to round their corners?
Use border radius, and it's not going to work in Outlook. It's not going to work in WebDE or GMX, and I don't care. I can still click on the link. So that's the important thing. I can still click on the link and buy your products, give you money, convert on your website. That's the important thing. It's more important than having rounded corners in Outlook.
So we want to make sure, Paul and Janie, just give me just a second here. But for one, I need some shout outs or emoji responses in the chat if you've ever been victimized by a rounded element in an email that wasn't clickable and wasn't actually a CTA, because I've absolutely clicked on those, not realizing that. But also, I think what I'm getting from you, Mark, is not to get too emotionally attached to the rounded corners, because they won't show up everywhere, and so it's good for us to know what elements of an email we can and can't get emotionally attached to. That seems important.
Get emotional about VML.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the important thing.
Very, very much so. Yeah. Jana and Paul, thoughts and feelings about this?
Yeah, I think it's about considering all your elements in your kind of design system, your email design systems. So if you've got like small elements like a pill, which is kind of just just a little element that will kind of almost flag a new section or something like that. If you're going to have that with rounded corners, and then you have buttons with rounded corners, don't do that, because you're going to likely confuse the recipients as they, think, do exactly what you said, Logan. Is it a button? No, it isn't. That's really frustrating. So there's definitely that kind of holistic view of like what all your elements do and the role that they play. But taking it beyond that, it's kind of, once you get out of the email, what is the visual language a recipient then sees on the website or the app? Is that sit the same? Are they going from rounded to square? Are they, you know, from a holistic brand point of view, are you suddenly changing the visual language for them? And so you kind of need to think about the wider view outside the email as well, to make sure that there's that consistency as they go through a journey and not just isolated within the email itself.
Paul stole the words right out of my mouth about that visual journey. I completely agree, because I should have just jumped in there. Yeah, I just agree with everything that Paul said about that visual journey, because it's a little bit jarring when you go from an email and it's those beautiful round corners and everything's rounded, and then you go to the website and it feels like a completely different brand with these tiny little changes that are there. So, and also what you said, Logan, previously about kind of holding your email far away from you and kind of almost squinting at it to see visually what it looks like with all these like rounded boxes everywhere. Because I think one of the emails on the previous slide you had there had like everything was so rounded. All the sections had little rounded boxes. When you kind of squint and look away from that, can you still tell what's what and what's really important on that email? I think is the critical bits there. But I do love a good rounded image here and there.
It's true. We do have I think somebody noted in the chat here, and it feels worth kind of addressing and mentioning, is like, obviously we do recognize that like nobody's designing emails in a vacuum outside of like there are brand guidelines that you have to adhere to, and some of those brand guidelines may be you have to round all the corners, right? But it might be worth at least then starting a conversation with the folks who created those brand guidelines, asking the questions around like, is that having the effect that we want it to? Does that make our visual hierarchy distinctive enough? So we certainly understand working with email is working within constraints. It's writing a poem. It's writing a haiku. Sometimes it's writing a limerick. It's about where you're having to adhere to some pretty strict constraints, both to meet kind of the email client needs as well as the needs of your own brand. So we always want to make sure that we recognize and honor that in what we're talking about.
And there's a balance you have to strike too. Email as a medium is different to your website as a medium, and your brand design guidelines need to be able to be flexible for both. And that really is down to the people at the organization and how they all feel about that. But I think they're intrinsically two different channels, two different mediums. They will need to have separate considerations, I would say, when it comes to design and even accessibility too.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Well, if you want to stand out, you could just go with all tiny boxes. I think that's one way that you could stand out. Just to be real clear for everybody in the chat, this is a joke. I just thought it was an amusing thing to put in. It's like, if you don't want any rounded corners, then just do this, which is a boggling word search. Although if anybody really wants to, spend some time on it.
Is it telling that the first word that I saw was stress?
I think it probably is. I think it's probably a little telling there. It does feel a little.
First word I saw was Outlook, but
I'd like to say that on mobile.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'll tell you up front, Paul. It gets real small. It gets real small on mobile. So I think something you don't have to kind of adhere to the rounded, but the underlying principle is like that you want to make sure that your content is easy to scan. So if you have too many of the same, kind of shapes around elements, that's going to be more difficult. That's, to all three of you have spoken to this. Like, so you want to make sure that that's true. What rounded corners also do well, though, is they help push content to the center more so it forces kind of more negative space. So you do want to think about like, and you were talking about this with fonts as well, Paul, like, it's not just like the text, but it's the space around the text, right? In the same way, so we want to make sure that we're always thinking about like, is everything visually distinctive in the email? Is it clearly parsable? And if we have too many of the same, does it lose out on those things? All right, trucking right along here. You all heard me mention a little bit about kind of Smart Check earlier. This is a feature that we have in Beefree. There's so many great tools, and I'm sure some of them are going to be kind of dropped in chat. There'll also be some resources in the little resource tab on the right. But at Beefree, we do have this Smart Check feature that scans your email design for common issues. So helps like identify if there's missing alt text for images and visuals. That lycopene or lysopene, I'm going to have to look this up afterwards. The tomato candles that we had earlier, for instance, we ran those through our smart check, and they had the exact same. It said like tomato candle behind each thing, which you might want to be like a little bit more descriptive. It also notes like kind of low color contrast on buttons and titles. It also points out if you have any kind of missing or incorrect heading structure. I think one of the other emails we looked at in the examples had an H1 but never used the H1. They just kept resizing their H2. So we want to make sure that semantic markup is being used in emails, because that, in particular with screen readers, like that helps identify like which helps screen readers prioritize which text should be like the headline. So we want to make sure, and if there's like any missing language attributes. So just a quick and easy tool if you're a Beefree user. We have some fantastic questions in the Q&A area, and we're going to jump into those. The top question by a good bit is, what's the single biggest change in email design since AI became mainstream? And I'm curious as to, like what you all think about that. What's your opinion?
Has AI gone mainstream for email specifically? Is the one question I'm answering.
A reasonable question to ask, I think.
Because I'm wondering if it's to do with like AI summaries. You've got it like Gemini summarizing emails and things like that. I don't know whether I've personally noticed anything that senders are doing in my own inbox to speak to how AI is changing email design. Top loading, front loading, making sure your headlines, your call to actions, and your preview text mention pertinent things. But again, I don't know. I think it's too early to say.
I'd agree with Jana, really. I think it's early days, but that doesn't mean to say that we're not going to see further changes. The impact is clearly with summaries at the moment, that kind of thing, to give you an idea. And interestingly enough, where does that pull from? It pulls from the HTML text content within your email. So don't do all image, otherwise there'll be nothing to pull from your email in that. So I kind of think it's a bit like SEO for email to think about.
Like SEO for email? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit early yet. Certainly don't ignore it.
Sure. Mark, any closing thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, AI is a tool. It's a useful tool, and a lot of people are using it for generating text content, for generating images. It's useful, but if you're using it properly, you should be checking everything before it goes out. So you shouldn't be able to see that something's built with AI, because there's a lot of telltale things that this is wrong, this is incorrect, this is made a mistake here or there. Everything that's created with AI should be checked before it's released.
It's true. Maybe another round of emoji responses in chat for anybody who has received a message from somebody that you clearly know was written by AI, and without a lot of that absolutely something that happens. I mean, I'll chime in here as well. Like I see AI thus far like as being less impactful on the design end of things, in terms of that, like more a little bit more on the content. All of us, like who are sending emails, usually have to create multiple iterations of those emails to some degree. Like, or maybe I had to create copy for this webinar, for the landing page, for each of the emails that went out. So I wrote a brief. I wrote like a draft of something for the landing page, and then I used AI to like iterate those into different things, and then spent time tweaking and changing the language and making sure that was consistent. But as far as like an easy iteration, it was helpful for that, from that side of things. All right, moving right along for the questions here from Samantha Roller. For emails that are more lengthy, are there specific design aspects that keep a customer engaged? Are shorter form emails the best option always?
Depends on the content.
Does it depend?
It depends on the brand. It depends on the content. Like, I think if you've got a lot of content, does it really all need to go in the email? Sometimes, yeah, but often no. Often you can sort of give somebody the teaser and then take them through onto your page, onto your landing page to give them more information. But I mean, I'm a big fan of interactive email, and you can sort of break content down like that. So it's sort of using tab layouts and things like that to reduce the overall length, and people can then focus on the information they're interested in and not have to read through every piece of it. You can have like an accordion or tabs or something like that, so you can just open up certain parts. From an accessibility point of view, that's not great. There's improvements coming with the CSS overflow, new CSS overflow spec that's coming out, which makes improvements, but still there are issues with that as well.
Yeah, that's good to know.
I think if you're sending long form newsletters, for example, like you want your entire newsletter to be in that email, it's going to be a big long block of text. But I think adopting some of those like visual cues that you usually see on blog posts can be a really good way of breaking up those big blocks of text you see in newsletters, like whether it's a pull quote or an image or something that you can do to just break it up a little bit. I think that can always help with still making it scannable and readable. But for those newsletters, you want all of your content to be in that email. So look into how people make their blog posts look great.
Yeah, I think the other part, I mean, those points that Mark said about just asking the question of, does it all have to go in the email, is definitely the first question to ask. If it does, then as Jenna says, kind of break it down. I think the next thing is kind of look at how long your paragraphs are. So don't have really long paragraphs, write shorter paragraphs. So we have space around them so they're easy to digest, and use headings. Headings are key for accessibility because they're there for scanning through by, whether you're using a screen reader or not, you can scan through them visually or audibly. So, using headings to kind of head up each section definitely brings a lot of value and a lot of makes things easier to kind of digest on the longer reading.
Using the term digest makes me think of one of my favorite analogies for this, and forgive me if any of you have heard this from me before, but like for an email, you want your email to be a tasting menu, not a party sub, right? Which is a party sub, also a concept I had to explain to my Italian colleagues, is it's not a thing in Italy, but you want those headlines, right? Like you want small bites that are distinctive, and that you enough space around those small bites of content for people to be able to digest them easily. You don't want to just like feed them one long paragraph of especially with their gluten allergy. You don't want to do that. So it'll be good. All right. Emailed from Pete Butler. We've got email design can feel really constrained sometimes. Are animated GIFs or GIFs still considered a good way of adding some joy into emails, or are there better options?
GIF. English language is hard enough without putting more strange pronunciations in there. But I think GIFs, they are good. They you can use them to sort of draw attention. But as we said earlier, don't have your flashing GIFs pointing to your CTA. It's distracting. There are accessibility concerns with GIFs, with the frame rate, if they're flashing too much, if they are they're very distracting, and it can make it harder to read the rest of the content. But if they're used subtly, they can be good. Also, think about how long the GIF plays for. Or just putting breaks in it. It could play a little bit and then have a big break. The way you can set GIFs up to have a 30-second pause after it's played if you want to help with that. Or you can have a GIF that stops after 3 plays. That can help improve the accessibility of it as well.
Anything that provides movement will draw the eye, right? Like that's just kind of how that works. In terms of like speaking to the last question, right? Like GIFs, subtle, like small animated GIFs can be a way of drawing the eye downward through content as well. That can be a thing. But yes, thinking about the accessibility concerns of it, and of course, as always, we know it won't display everywhere. Like for Outlook, if you all are B2B, you just can't depend on those things, sadly. But we do recommend still looking at animated GIFs for yourself for joy, like just for yourself. So if you have to send a lot of emails in Outlook, that's fine. From Lauren Apostol, how important is it to not have picture only with alt text added emails?
Very, very important. If there's only images, then it's not going to load for some people. You're going to lose the hierarchy of the text. So anybody using a screen reader isn't going to be able to navigate it as cleanly as if you have some semantic hierarchy there. So what's a heading? What's a link? What's a paragraph? It's pausing mid-paragraph. Alt text, you generally with screen readers, it will read all the whole alt text, whereas if you're reading a paragraph, you can pause it, you can go back, you can read a specific word, you can get it to spell out a word. There's lots of advantages there. Also, in terms of scaling, if your images scale up, if you're trying to zoom in, if you like have some visual impairments, you want to make it larger, the images blur. The images, the text can't be translated. You can't highlight the text and look up a word that you don't know. There's so many, I'm sure I've missed a load. But yeah, so many issues with text and images. If it's all of that content, it's bad.
And going back to the notion about AI and people using AI to summarize their emails, if all of your text is in an image and someone's using AI to help summarize the email, they're not going to get anything out of that email. So again, just like another reason to avoid text and images.
Perhaps kind of a related question here. Let's see. Camila has written, what is the best way to add GIFs to an email without making the email too heavy or slow to load? It's a lot of just image optimization is to do that. I think that's absolutely the case.
There's a tool out there called easygif.com as like a non-designer, non-coder. It's a website that I found really easy to use to be able to optimize my GIF and like take certain frames and things out of it so it's under a certain size.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to use GIFs, be selective, be purposeful behind it. Use it for to solve a problem for a reason. Is it going to add value? What's the email message going to communicate if the image isn't there? Don't rely on the image to communicate in and of itself. You need to kind of have the text there to kind of support it as well. Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of lean towards the kind of WCAG guidelines of 5-second limit on plays of GIFs. So if you're going to do that, then it needs to be kind of towards the top of your email. Otherwise, it will stop playing by the time you scroll down, let's say, the long email. So you need to kind of think about that as well.
In terms of file sizes as well, one of the important things to look at, which is often overlooked, is the total size of all your images in the email. Having one large image and then a few small ones is fine. It's better than having hundreds of medium-sized images, because if you're looking at the total download size is something I think a lot of people overlook.
Well, these have been some great questions. I definitely understand there are a lot more questions in there. We got a lot of questions. I'm sorry that we're not able to address all of them today, but we do want to be respectful of everybody's time. We are so grateful for your time with us today and for choosing to come and hang out with us. And the chat's been going off. We love to see an engaged chat. So very grateful for you all, for my panelists. We do have if you all are not a Beefree user and you're curious about a little bit more curious about what we do and maybe want to check out that Smart Check feature, we do have a free business trial that you can get into there. And that also includes a discount if you do that before October 15th. And if you are a Beefree user, you can still kind of upgrade and try it out and see those things. But thank you all so much for taking the time to hang out with me and to argue about word pronunciations and to lend your expertise. Very grateful for all of you. And thank you to all of you in the chat. Goodbye for now, everybody. Everybody wave. We'll just do a little wave. Bye.
Everyone.
Children's show style,